Hello and welcome to the Wednesday TA check-in for Bitcoin here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is October 2nd, 2024. And yeah, we're just going to get right into it. Bitcoin ended up at the bottom side of the recovery zone. It met all of the lower term time frame conditions that I talked about on Monday for a move down to this zone. And thus far, it has held up on lower term time frames. Nice little dip below here in the previous daily candles. So this was actually the Wednesday candle. It's still Wednesday for me right now, but we have the Thursday candle open. So we're just going to define some pretty easy criteria here. The swing down trend is broken, or swing up trend is broken. So if we were to look at this particular low right here, this swing right here, this is technically the swing low, swing high, swing lower low. But there is no closing low in here. This is one continuous move up. So on a closing basis, this is where we'd want to see another higher low come in, preferably. And at worst, we're looking at possibly equal lows, right? So if we do see $60,000 dropped, then we're looking at 58.4. You have to excuse my son is sick in the background, but he's being taken care of. He's feeling a little better. 58.4 is the next big level. If $60,000 is lost, and realistically, it's if yesterday's low is lost, we're looking at continuation down, right? So yesterday's low or Wednesday's low is at 59,969.20, and when I say lost, I do mean on a closing basis. And if we haven't already seen a test down into the 58.4 level, or somewhere in between 60,300 and 58.4. Then I would be looking for that continuation to test down further. Anywhere below there, keep a close eye on this 57.5 swing low or wick low. If that's lost, then we do start looking to this 55,850 or the rest of this risk zone. But as it stands right now, as I mentioned, Bitcoin coming down to the bottom side of the recovery zone is something we talked about on Monday. It met all of those conditions in Tuesday's candle into Wednesday, even rejecting around this close open area and all of the rejections here from the prior mini uptrend here off of that big dump down to $49,000. So, I mentioned that I was not super bullish on things heading back up immediately or getting that immediate continuation if I did see this 61.8 to 62.8 area dropped right in the middle of that recovery zone. And, that's where, we've now seen two down candles. We do see that there is the possibility that Bitcoin in the early hours here is trying to test up further. But keep the conditions in mind, below 60,300, and especially any closes below yesterday's low at 59,969. Nice. Then I would be looking for tests down, further into this no man's land between the recover and risk area at 58.4. Anywhere below there, even on lower term time frames, I would keep a very close eye on this swing low at 57.5. We start to see dailies closing under there. If it hasn't already tested the bottom side of the risk zone at 55,850, that's where I'd look next. In a more severe crash scenario, if we did get things, really dumping out to the bottom side and ripping through all of the levels, where would Landy be looking? We're looking at like what everybody would call a black swan, but realistically, even the other day we were talking about this coming down, right? If it couldn't hold the pivot zone, once it put in the high, we were looking for things to come down further. The news came after about many of the things that we've been hearing in the world as it relates to nations and even some things that have been happening here in the United States. This is not really, it's doing its own thing, to be quite honest, and it was giving us these warnings ahead of time. Can the news actually exacerbate things? Yes. That's where when we are in a downside move like this, if the news gets really bad, we'll start seeing, potentially, if we start seeing liquidity exiting Bitcoin and markets in general, and it were to come all the way through, cut all the way through all of the supports, just kind of ignoring support and resistance, that kind of stuff, throwing price down below the $49,000 level, all the way down through all of these other targets. I've said this many times before. In a crash scenario, look to the Bitcoin electrical cost basis for miners, and in this case, it's still at around 42.5. So If we were to see a consistent trend, like a downtrend into that, we would see this number come down over time. But in a crash scenario or flash crash scenario, just understand that I wouldn't be looking too much further down below that electrical cost, although it can dip below it. Usually that is an area of extreme interest. Of course, do your own research and all that good stuff. Not financial advice, of course. Now, what do I want to see to the upside? Pretty easy. Looking left, we want to regain the same areas that were just lost. So I'd mentioned that I wanted to see Bitcoin for sustainability of this uptrending move to immediately try back to its highs at 55 to or 65 to 65 and a half and into the pivot zone and higher, to go test 67 to 72, 68 to 70, all that stuff. Then I would have needed to see 61.8 to 62.8 at this high hold up. That has not happened. We've gotten a deeper correction on price, and this would be a logical area to start looking for a possible low to be set if Bitcoin can close back above 62,380, provided it doesn't drop yesterday's low, reminder, and on a close, right? But as it stands right now, to set a low, we need to see price closing back above 62,380, preferably back above the Tuesday open at 63.3. Of course, back above 63.8 here at the top side of the recovery zone. I'm looking 63.8 to 64K, $65,000, and then right back into the pivot zone to test this high up here. Any closes, of course, above 66,550. If we haven't already seen a test to the top side of the pivot zone, that's where I would look next at 67,272. Anywhere above there, I'd be looking 68 to 70 at the run the high zone. That is this high over here. Of course, that's the first lower high of the second major downtrend of the range. And then anywhere above there, 70 to 72 essentially at the double top and then the all-time high and higher. I do think it's prudent to pay attention to the Wednesday into Thursday session. Yes, it's already in the Thursday candle, but here in the United States, I would pay pretty close attention to what happens coming into the Thursday New York session. That's going to be kind of telling as we head into the weekend. So if price at minimum holds sideways on Thursday into Friday and the weekend is lower liquidity, we could start to see some of a cool down of the volatility in the lower term timeframes, and then paint a little bit clearer picture on what's going to happen from there. Now, I'm going to throw on my Bollinger Band set here. This is the Landy Bands. And for those that have asked me, this is in my profile. It's the bit.ly link there. It is a private indicator, but if you're using the link, you can get it for free, obviously. It's always going to be free, but it's not publicly searchable. So just follow the bit.ly link in my X profile. Follow the link in the video description down below if you're watching this on YouTube to get the indicator. It's got a bunch of other stuff. So if you don't have like a premium plan for TradingView, you can get this indicator. Obviously, you have to add it to favorites to find it, and then add it to your chart. But it's got Bollinger Bands. It's also got an entire moving average set, and it's all customizable between SMAs and EMAs. You can customize the length. You can turn those on and off globally, by the way. You can turn on and off Bollinger Bands. Turn on the moving averages if you like. You can customize the labels, the length, all of that stuff, the color. We'll turn back on the Bollinger Bands. It's got the volatility metrics down there for BBWP, so you don't need another separate indicator. This is showing that price is in an expansive posture right now, but it's not really getting aggressive because it's between the bands. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But it's got a super trend in there. It's got signals on the other page. Please read the updates. Yes, it's not the most comprehensive thing. This is being built. It's basically a beta, but all of the features that are in here work well, and all the different indicators. But there's other stuff in there that you can kind of comb through. I was getting questions about it, and then there was a few people that were like, hey, I don't have like premium for this. I can only have one indicator. Well, this has got a bunch of stuff built right in. If you can only have like one or two indicators on your chart, this one has multiple functions and can take the place of a couple of them. All right, so Bollinger Band set is how I determine the volatility levels of interest and when things are going to be going into an expansive posture or a contractive posture. So in this case, Bitcoin lost the upper first, tested the support, lost the basis, even retested towards it, but it's sitting on the lower first standard deviation. And after pushing up through the upper first and into the upper second area, even the upper third there, getting that little bit of expansion, mean reversion back down to, of course, test this high, which is what we were talking about, which just so happens to be right around the bottom side of the recovery zone. So you might remember Monday, if this area was lost, what are we looking for? We're looking for the last lower high that just got broken to be retested as support. That is what we are seeing here. It happens to line up with an area that I like to see tagged or retested at worst with the lower first standard deviation. So essentially, it was turning itself around and recovering back through the basis, hitting those upper bands and getting a little bit of expansion. And then the mean reversion play is back to the high and it's around the lower first. So if you're going to lose the basis, next area you look for is the lower first. Seeing some daily support in that area is good. Of course, getting back above the basis, that's pretty much confluent with Wednesday's high at 62,380. That would set the swing low and the closing low. Of course, as I mentioned, I want to see closes back above 63.3 and of course back above 63 at the top side of the recovery zone to be excited about testing the local structural high of this move at 65.5, $66,000 up here. If the lower first is lost, you'll see that the lower second is lining up with the very next area of support and resistance that I just called out at 58.4. Anywhere below there, I'm looking for expansion down into this zone. Of course, I would need to see a close below 57.5. If we didn't see price action already dip down below there and hit some of these areas of interest, then I would be looking for the lower third area right at the bottom side of the risk zone, top side of the danger zone at 55,850. Now, again, if we do see Bitcoin recover, start to push back up and go and run some of the areas above 63,800, I would look right to $65,000. It just so happens to be right where the upper first is, right around that area. Now, above there, we have the 65.5 to the $66,500 area. I would start to look for that top side of the pivot zone around that 67,272. Right where the upper second standard deviation is starting to come in, anywhere above there, 68 to 70. You can see the upper third is in there. But above the upper second, I'd be looking for expansion up into this area in a more aggressive posture into that 68 to 70. And then, of course, any closes below the lower second that loses this 58,400. Again, I'm looking for more aggressive expansion down into the next area at 55,850 and possibly lower into that danger zone. Which is all the way down to 53.5. Reminder, we haven't seen any daily closes below here. If we did, I'd be looking 52.5 and lower, likely for some distribution. So as it stands right now, a lot of people are freaking out about this little move down. It's fine. I've said this on Monday. I've gotten a lot of messages. They seem panicked, at least when I'm reading them. I don't think they actually are panicked, but like, why, what's happening, what's going on, why is it down here, is the news playing a role in this? Yeah, it probably exacerbated the move in lower term timeframes, right, and changed some of that structure, but it's fine. It's literally mean reversion back to test the downtrend break high right there. So this was the lower high, higher low, higher high, come back, retest. If this area holds up, that's nice and bullish. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Now, we're going to talk about a few other things in some lower term timeframes real quick here, because this is what I'm going to watch over the next few days until I talk to you on Friday. We're going to go to the 12-hour first. So we're going to work our way down the timeframes. And we're going to reference stochastic momentum and the possibility of some RSI based stuff here as well in just a moment on the daily, but we need to see what the context is that I'm going to be talking about here, because I like to watch the 12-hour. And the reason why I like to watch the 12 hours, because one, it's usually very, very clean. You can see the 12-hour closes here. And once we saw the 12-hour closes lose 65.5, it came down and sat right where 63,800. Once it closed below there, we got a close open below there. It tried to hold that area, and then it was just dumped down to the next level. Super, super clean. When you get that horizontal support and resistance worked out on the daily, you're going to see the price interacts, the auction interacts with these areas again in a very clean manner. You can also see locally that structure that we talked about on the bottom side of the daily, right? That 62.5 to 62.3 area. That's the same area that was just retested right here and failed, right? The lows right here for the 12-hour and the daily. So once that area was lost, we were essentially looking for it to come down further, test into these areas here. It just kind of dumped right through to the bottom side of the zone because the daily zone at that 60,000 to 60,300 is, prime area for a retest, because that was the last real big lower high in the daily that was just broken. So not surprised to see price back here. It's fine as it stands right now. Now in the 12-hour, we do have higher low structure that was broken. We've got a higher high. We've got a little bit of a stair step down. This was just a consolidation move down. So we're in the higher low. We've now broken that area. So this is a trend break on the 12-hour. For it to be a deviation, we would need to see it closing, the next 12-hour candles, once it puts in a low, to close back up, above 65.5. So I would give it some time to kind of work itself out. If it is going to put in like a lower high and then equal low or slightly lower low, or a lower low, it's got to take out wherever the next lower high is to at least get a trend break at minimum. The 12-hour is going to be interesting because if it does set a low at 62,380, that's going to match the daily. That is also a retest and would be a reclaim of these candles here. And then we'd be looking up to 63.8 at minimum on the 12-hour. We can start getting above some of the resistance here that it was just rejecting at 63.8. Then I'd look for, retest to 65 to 65.5 at minimum, test bottom side of these candles and above, right? If not, we're looking for continuation down to the next area. And you can see how this level has been interacted with at 58.4. But here's what I really like to see. So we do have a potential here. So we've got this lower low. This is, a higher low, but this low down here with a higher low in RSI, and we've got a higher low over here with a lower low in RSI. So this is a hidden bullish divergence if a low is set. I personally need to see closes back above 62,380 for that low to be set. This would be known as continuation and might turn into a deviation. You see, we've even tagged the bearish control zone of RSI here. So I would need to see a low set. We would see this area from that low that I just called out to this low would get this little blue line on my particular indicator. It's just for a hidden bullish divergence. And really what that means is it's a continuation drive, or at minimum a good retest of the areas that were just lost, right? So that's where we would, set a low and maybe see a retest of these areas. Doesn't mean that it's going to be reclaimed, but at least see price rise again to retest some of the breakdown here. So that is something I'm going to keep an eye out for once the low is set. The other thing I'm going to keep an eye out for is the momentum indicator, regular Stoke. Again, if you want to get a free regular Stoke, just type reverse Stoke into this area here, and you can get a free regular Stoke, and not a Stoke RSI. But if you want to get a reverse Stoke, there's one with pivots. It's called reverse Stoke BA Pig Gift on panel, and you'll be able to get the same pivot numbers as this particular paid indicator. But either way, closes back above 61,350 would turn momentum back to the upside. Well, 61,350 is a little ways away, but a close above 61,350 is actually Bitcoin's trading above it. I don't know what I'm talking about. So the next 12-hour, if it closes above there, we would see it actually turn Stoke back to the upside initially. We would still need to see the criteria of closing above 62,380. So again, 61,350, Bitcoin's trading about $50 above there right now. If it can maintain that through the next 12-hour close, and then especially on a closing low with closes above 62,380, then I would be looking for price to move up and retest and confirm that hidden bullish divergence on the 12-hour. And realistically, what I'm watching is the 4-hour as it relates to the 12-hour. So the 4-hour is weak, but it is turned back to the upside here. $61,000 is the momentum pivot. We have some bullish divergence in play here. That doesn't mean that it's immediately going to green candle its way to the moon. We did just see that bullish divergence confirm, but realistically, this doesn't get going until we see the same areas break to the upside, 62,380 at this high right here. If it does come back down, we're looking at some continuation at minimum in the lower term timeframes, down below on any closes, especially below 59,969. Nice. So there is the picture being painted that if basically $60,000 holds and 62, 380, 62.4 is regained, that we're likely going to see a rise in price to the top side of this range, 63.8 to 64K, possibly 65, and then 65.5 to the pivot zone and or this high structure over here at $66,500, 66 to 66.5, and then possibly move on back to the upside. So that possibility is there. Just keep a close eye on it through the rest of today into Friday. And I don't have too much more to say in that regard. I will just throw like bands on here for just a moment. It was a nice, beautiful compression. I some people had asked like, hey, did you take the short? I'm like, absolutely, I took the short. It was even like on the lower term time frames. It was such a beautiful breakdown and retest of this 65.5. Then you had the 4-hour compression with expansion down, and it was still an expansive phase. Even had a nice trending rejection for volatility with Bollinger Bands at the lower first here, and then down on expansion. And now we got the retest of, after a little pop up, got a retest of the lower second, regain of the lower first. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, you see where the basis is. Basis is right there at an area that we need to see recovered for the bulls at 62.5, basically 62.3. 80, 62.4, 62.5 basically is the area that needs to be reclaimed. And then the upper first is right there at overhead resistance at 63.8. And then the next area is basically the upper second, which is right around 65 and 65.5. So everything is lining up with kind of the things that I was just talking about when it comes to volatility. Then, of course, below the lower second, we're looking for continuation down to the lower third area. And you can see that is, essentially at our 58.4 level. So we have a billion different confluences going on here. That's going to do it for me today. I think that, it's not as relevant, in my opinion, to be looking at some of these other things today just yet. I think Friday's when these are going to be more actionable. Nothing doing on RSI right now. Pretty far away from the moving average. It's not super interesting to me, but some key levels to understand. The edge of the bearish control zone is at $58,000. The midline is at $62,000. The simple moving average here is at 65.5 or 65,651. So basically right there in the pivot zone. And the that is the bullish control zone. Edge of the bullish control zone is right around the highs here at 65.5. 66.5, sorry. 65.5 is the SMA here. That's a 12-period moving average. And the bullish control zone, or edge of the bullish control zone, is right at the local moves high at 66.5. My apologies. If the 12-hour, by the way, I'll leave you with this actually. The 12-hour can turn back to the upside. The zone holds, basically 60K holds. Then I'd look for the possibility of, this number coming down. $66,000 on the daily, coming in for a bearish zone test for momentum. If we start seeing a low set on the 12-hour, and especially a low set on the daily, and we begin to see this, price moving back to the upside, I would look for that possibility to start presenting itself for a momentum shift. That doesn't mean it's going to shift momentum, and as long as this is staying pointed down, that would, indicate anywhere obviously below that 66.5 high that eyes on for price to minimum go sideways, to sideways and possibly back down. All right, so that's what I'm gonna leave you with. I will talk to you again on Friday. Oh, and apologies, we got a little goofed up. The chop and charts stuff with Benny and Maines and myself wasn't today. It's gonna be tomorrow. So if you would like to join us tomorrow, I believe it's gonna be at, I want to say 1:30 or 2:30. I will update you on X, but I want to say it's like 1:30 or 2:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time which would put it at 4:30 to 5:30 time frame for the start time. So I think it might be after 5 Eastern, so it might be 2:30 my time. We'll double check. I'll update you online on X. And you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.